The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
All right, so I have to start by telling this story because if there ever was a sign that I should absolutely record a podcast episode with somebody, it happened with you. And for everybody to understand, I like to have an initial conversation with people before I bring them on, just to get to know each other a little bit. And then also to, plan out the episode so we can make it as informative as possible. And so Michelle Routhenstein and I were on the phone and we were going through everything, talking about cardiology, talking about being a preventative cardiology dietitian, nutrition, all this stuff. And at the end, I was like, hey, by the way, I've been taking steps around my house this entire phone conversation. And it was a good 45-minute conversation. And she goes, oh my God, so have I. And so I was like, this is meant to be. And then she even one-upped me by saying, are you wearing a weight vest? And I was like, no, I'm not wearing a weight vest. So you got me there. But hey, welcome to Deep Shallow Dive, Michelle. This is seriously like an unbelievably awesome break from my geopolitical stuff. And I'm so glad to have you to talk about all this health related stuff. So I'll give you a quick minute to just introduce yourself and then we'll jump into it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. I'm a registered dietitian who specializes in cardiovascular disease. So I like to prevent and manage heart disease, create more awareness about how we can improve our risk profile because we're all at risk. Heart disease is the #1 cause of death globally. But 80 to 90% is preventable, which is why I even went into this niche early on. So let's take action and let's take an empowered approach in your heart health. I'm really excited to dive deeper into that and educate your audience to know what that even means.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, let's start with step one in assessing someone's heart health. Like you get a call or you get an inquiry into your website. What's step one for you of assessing a heart health?
So it's important to recognize that you don't feel heart disease brewing in your arteries. You don't feel it until it's at the later stages, and it could either be a blockage, it could be a blood clot, it could be your heart pump's not working as well, you could be having heart arrhythmias. So it's asymptomatic. So that means in order for us to look at your risk profile, we need to do a little bit of digging. We won't know unless you actually get blood work and we start seeing what is showing up in your blood work. There's also advanced testings that tell us more of if there's plaque buildup, if your heart is working too hard, if there is, heart disturbances, and that's one more step further. But initially speaking, simple blood work can tell us a lot about you and your risk profile.
Okay, that's great. All right, let's riff into this blood work because I feel like everybody when they, get their labs done, and honestly, gosh, you probably get 1,000 more calls than I do. But, my friends call me and they'll be like, hey, man, I just got my lab work done. And immediately, the only really things they key on, and this is because it's the only things their doctor keys on, and this is not to bash on doctors, but again, we're talking nutrition here. They say my cholesterol number is, let's say 245. And then they say, my doctor said that's high. And then they say my LDL is, 125. And they say that's high. So why don't you take us through the markers that you think are important, whether it's those two or those two in addition to? I'd love to hear that.
It's important to recognize that heart disease can brew in many different ways in someone's body. I like to take a step back and simplify it for a second. Imagine your blood vessel. If there is blood sugar that doesn't belong in excess chronically 5-10 years, if there is inflammation in those blood vessels, if there is atherogenic LDL cholesterol, if there's oxidative stress, what I call havoc in the blood vessel, things that don't belong, that are repeatedly there, what's going to happen? It can cause a micro tear on their artery wall that's going to allow for these LDL and ApoB particles to deposit, become oxidized, and lead to an inflammatory response leading to plaque formation. If there's havoc in the blood vessel, blood pressure is going to rise. Your heart is working harder for it to work and do its job. When you have all this havoc in the blood vessel, what does that also cause? Causes heart rhythm problems as well. There are three main functions of the heart. And if we don't look at the blood vessel and understand that any of these things can cause it, we're missing the bigger picture. A lot of times you go to a doctor and all they look at is a lipid panel. That's not, we have to look beyond that. The lipid panel is important. I'm not discounting it. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is heart disease is multifactorial. If it was so simple to just say it's lipids alone, we would be able to make it not the number one killer globally. It's not.
Let's define the lipid panel for people. Can you define that?
Yeah, so on a standard lipid panel, you'll have your total cholesterol, you'll have your LDL, your HDL, and your triglyceride levels. Okay, and what we could do from there is kind of derive what we call non-HDL cholesterol. So there's LDL that can be atherogenic and LDL that isn't atherogenic. Atherogenic, by definition, is plaque forming. Okay, so if you were to get an ApoB, which most doctors don't test, it actually directly tests the atherogenic LDL cholesterol in your bloodstream. That's a great way to assess your risk of atherogenic cholesterol. But many doctors won't do an ApoB, or maybe your insurance doesn't cover it, etc. So you can take your standard lipid panel, take your total cholesterol, and subtract your HDL cholesterol from that number. You'll get what we call non-HDL cholesterol. In the general population, so someone who has no risk factors for heart disease, who does not have a family history of heart disease, Lp(a) is normal, then we're targeting that to be less than 130 milligrams per deciliter. In someone who does have risk factors, who does have a family history, who has known plaque in their arteries, who's had a stent, a cardiovascular event, we want that non-HDL cholesterol to be less than 100 milligrams per deciliter. It's a surrogate marker for ApoB cholesterol.
Okay. I want to talk about this ApoB because honestly, gosh, I don't even think I've ever heard of that. And I don't think most people even, that's not on the radar. The only thing that's on the radar is, first of all, it's that total cholesterol number. And the second it's above 200, again, it's like sirens go off. Okay, let's go on a statin, which to me is a terrible, terrible initial approach, probably a terrible initial, secondary, and tertiary approach, and it should only really be used as a last resort. I don't know if you have thoughts on this, but when I researched that 200 number, I was like, where did this number even come from? It really seemed in the late, I think, 1980s, early 1990s, it almost seemed like a manufactured number that, the big pharma lobby organizations helped create. And that number used to be 300 and then it became to 200. Do you know anything about that?
I mean, so the 200 number is kind of looking at most people who have a very high level of total cholesterol tend to also have high levels of ApoB cholesterol. So it is correlated with that. And I wouldn't discount it. And I think sometimes being alarmed is not a bad thing, right? So those things being red is a sign for you to look a little bit closer. Let's deep dive into your heart health. Let's not ignore the numbers. Right. So, like, if you have a very high amount of total, you likely have a lot of atherogenic cholesterol in most people, and some people know. And that's why we test a little bit further so we can be smart and don't ignore it. That's my biggest take, because we have to dive a little bit deeper. And this also means dive deeper than your lipid panel in totality, right? So, we need to be looking at your inflammatory markers. The most easy inflammation marker to get, and the most researched alongside cardiovascular disease, is your hsCRP. It's your inflammatory marker. It's high sensitivity C-reactive protein. Ideally, we want this to be less than 1 milligram per deciliter. The higher this is, the more correlative it is to atherosclerosis and increased risk of cardiovascular events, what we call in the research literature as MACE, major adverse cardiovascular events. So we need to target this. It's not the only inflammatory marker. There could be other signs of inflammation like homocysteine levels that are high. That could be a sign. High GGT levels, which is liver inflammation, that could be another sign. High levels of IL-6, which is another inflammatory marker. High levels of LPPLA2. Most times, if one of these are high, all of them tend to be on the higher end. However, it's important that we're looking at all these things because inflammation is what's the storm. It's what accelerates that plaque more than anything else.
No, I think inflammation is probably not only one of the best markers for something's going on in your body, but it's also unbelievably important. And personally, I feel like it's kind of the root of all issues that people have. Like when there's inflammation, there's other things, all these other things that get like clinical diagnosis, like fibromyalgia or lupus, or even, chronic bowel disease and all that. So much of that, in my opinion, is really linked to that inflammation. And then when people are like, well, what exactly is that? In my opinion, I'm just like, that's just like toxicity in your body that allows for maybe water to accumulate around different areas. And then it's almost like you're creating a toxic state in your body via inflammation. How would you define inflammation for people? And how would you maybe help them understand if they even have it, I guess, visually, maybe outside of blood tests?
Yeah. So it's important to recognize you mentioned all of those disease states that are inflammatory. So if you look actually at the risk factors for heart disease, and you asked me earlier, if someone comes and calls you up, I mean, what do you look for to assess all these things? So medical history is huge. Most people don't realize that everything is connected. And so when someone comes to me and they have acid reflux, Hashimoto's, they have a history of rheumatoid arthritis, or they have anything that diverticulosis, any type arthritis, that all of those disease states actually increases the risk of heart disease by 2 to 4 times if you did not have them. Because inflammation is that accelerator of plaque formation in the arteries. It damages the blood vessels a lot sooner. But a lot of times you may not even feel low-grade systemic inflammation. It's not something like you feel like when you get a cut on your hand and then all of a sudden you see, oh, wow, it's really red, it's inflamed, all this process. You see the outer components of inflammation that actually can happen on a low grade level in your body. And the best way to kind of explain it is your body is seeing something as, oh, we got to go heal this. Something is not right. It's not imbalanced. What we need the body to do is not doing. So your body is trying its best to heal itself, and it struggles to do that. And that's when you start getting all this inflammation. And so we really need to assess what is the trigger of inflammation. So without testing for inflammation, right? Let's say you're not going to go to the doctor for another couple months. You can't check HSCRP, IL-6, all those important factors. There's a couple things you can do to check for inflammation right now. One is take a soft measuring tape and locate your belly button, not your pant size. Don't suck in, don't suck out, and measure your waist circumference. Alone pumps out pro-inflammatory proteins and cytokines that can increase that HSCRP to astounding levels. So we need to target your waist circumference. We need to make sure that we are addressing abdominal adiposity. It is the center of so many chronic diseases and so many issues with heart health. So we need to address that abdominal weight. The second thing is, let's look at your gut health. I can't tell you the first time I meet someone and we're on our 90-minute initial call, I pull up the Bristol stool chart, which is a chart that basically shows all the different types of what your stool will look like.
I love this.
I just met someone.
I love it. I love it. I did a whole episode on pooping and peeing and what the different colors look like, what the different smells, account for. And I'll tell you what, I've said this before, so I'm going to say it again. I literally look at my stool every morning after I go. I want to see What was yesterday's food? How did that get digested? The smell. And thank God, I mean, man, I'll tell you, the main times it smells is when I go out to restaurants. And then that shows me, okay, what I just had at that restaurant and paid way too much for, because prices are out of the roof these days. Look at how that got deposited into the latrine. That's not good. That's not good. I love that you talk about that. Let me ask you real quick. I also think you talked about something that is so underrated, the waist circumference. You're absolutely right. Like measuring your waist. Now, is that for men and women, or does that lean like is it more important for, or a bigger marker for men for their waist, and is there another marker, maybe hips for women, or is it waist for both?
I would say waist for both. And I have to tell you, every time I meet someone, I tell them, you when they're working with me, I want you to know that number as your baseline because that's a target point. And most people are like, oh my God, I didn't realize that would be the number because they're usually measuring their pant size and they don't realize their girth is so much bigger. The amounts will differ what our targets are with men and women, right? So with women, generally speaking, we want that to be less than 35 inches. And for males, we want that less than 40 inches. However, if someone has had a cardiac event, if someone is of South Asian descent, we need that to be 2 inches less than that
Okay. Okay.
because their body is more susceptible to having metabolic syndrome at a lower level.
Okay, got it. So here's takeaway number one. This is awesome because I hope a lot of people do this. Take a tape measure and literally put the first end inside your belly button. If you've got an Audi, maybe you have to hook it on your belly button, but you're talking about going directly around your waist, I guess, parallel with your belly button, or I don't know if it's parallel, but right at the belly button, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. I love that. Okay. And give us the numbers again that we should be targeting.
So less than 35 inches for a woman, less
Okay.
than 40 inches for a male. If you have had a cardiovascular event or you're of South Asian descent, those are 2 inches less in both genders.
Okay. Got it. Now, why South Asian descent? Are they just smaller frames?
No, they get metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, and diabetes at a much thinner frame. So it's important that we're targeting those pro inflammatory cytokines more strictly so that we're preventing metabolic syndrome.
Okay, got it, got it. All right, we're going to get into metabolic syndrome in a second. Let me just finish out on the lipid panel. So, really, we're talking about the cholesterol number. Obviously, I think most people, when they hear HDL, they've been told, oh, that's the good cholesterol. When they hear LDL, they've been told that's the bad cholesterol. But I don't even know if people really know what good and bad means. So, quickly define that for us.
So, LDL has the potential to create plaque in the arterial wall. We
Okay.
don't want plaque in the artery wall. It narrows our arteries. It makes it harder to pump blood in our arteries. It can lead to blood clots, dislodgements, complete blockages that increase our risk of heart attacks and strokes. Our HDL is the good cholesterol because its ideal function is to pick up some of the LDL in the arterial wall, shuffle it back to the liver to be broken down, and therefore it clears some of that LDL, quote unquote, bad cholesterol from the arteries. But the research now shows it's not so much about hiking up the HDL, it's about making that HDL more functional. So by doing it, we're helping it do its job better. So higher is not necessarily more protective. The functionality is more important. And HDL and LDL are independent of each other. We used to say, oh, spike up that HDL really high, doesn't matter what your LDL is. We've debunked that. LDL above a certain threshold becomes atherogenic, and that can cause more plaque to form in the arterial wall.
Okay, got it. All right. So people should think about LDL as kind of like goop. It's like goop that gets stuck to the inside walls of a hose. And in this case, the hose is your artery, not the veins, right? This is specific to arteries.
So this is your arteries. So kind of just to bring it out a little bit, you mentioned men and women and how some things change. So oftentimes in men, the goop, so to speak, gets stuck in the larger arteries. So the coronary arteries, arteries that go to the heart muscle. In women, it actually happens in the smaller, the microvascular system, the smaller arteries of the heart. So that way it's different in terms of how women get symptoms for a heart attack versus men, and how it could show up differently on testing as well. So any artery can get clogged, but it goes into typically the bigger types of arteries. That's most commonly what we look at, but it can also happen in our smaller arteries as well.
Okay, got it. All right. So the LDL is clogging, causing the arteries to get more narrow. And then the goal of the HDL is to really maybe break apart those LDL goops and then take it back to the liver and sort of recycle it. Is that what you're saying?
So it doesn't break it down. It kind of shuffles it to the liver. It
Shuffles it. Okay.
tells it to go
Shuffles
to
it to
the
the
liver
liver.
to get broken down. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I want to talk about triglycerides for a second because personally, I think they are so ridiculously important to understand. And again, LDL, HDL, and total cholesterol get so much of the focus and notoriety. Most people aren't even paying attention to triglycerides. So define triglycerides and help us understand what that is.
Yeah, so there's two different components, and I think it's important not to be in one camp or the other. They all matter. We don't need to choose a camp. Let's look at everything, right? So triglycerides and HDL, if we have high triglyceride levels and low HDL, that's actually a hallmark sign of metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance. Oftentimes, that's a sign that your body is not processing this extra food that you're consuming, and it's causing all of these fatty substances to be in the arteries where it doesn't belong. We want to target triglycerides in the general population less than 150 milligrams per deciliter, but in people who are at higher risk, it should actually be less than 100 milligrams per deciliter. So we do want to shift it. My focus is the prevention, not the treatment of disease. And so that's why I give you these more stricter parameters. It really helps to prevent what I called before havoc in the blood.
Okay, got it, got it. And so, sometimes I hear people talk about triglycerides as the measure of fat in your blood. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, so it's kind of a fatty substance, but so is LDL as well.
Okay.
It's kind of more of just like your body is not processing food as well as it should. So instead of the food getting broken down and being put into the cell, it ends up staying in the blood vessel for a longer period of time, which is not what we want. It seems almost like perhaps your insulin is more resistant to doing its job versus being sensitive to do its job. So we want to make sure that we're lowering that triglyceride because that also increases remnant cholesterol. So essentially, there's just a lot of excess that doesn't belong and it has to go somewhere. So that can even of itself cause inflammation and cause the body to try to heal that and lead to some plaque progression as well.
Okay, got it, got it. Okay, so fundamentally, it's really all about trying to minimize the plaque buildup in arteries. And then can you reverse that? Let's say somebody has high markers on everything and fundamentally whether it's through an angiogram or something they've noticed closures of arteries and things like that. Let's talk about the process of reversing that because I think it is possible, right?
So we have to discuss that there's two different types of plaque. And so that makes a big difference in terms of reversibility. So I see a lot of people who come to me with outrageously high calcium scores, and even people who have 10, 20 calcium scores. And the goal is still the same. It's to take the plaque that's hardened. So when you go to a calcium score, they're measuring calcified plaque. It's the last stage of the atherosclerotic process. There are many stages. Our goal is actually not to dislodge that. That can cause a cardiovascular event. Our goal is to push that hardened plaque on the outer edges of the arteries so it never causes a problem. Stabilize it, keep it there, leave it on the outer edges. Don't come in the middle. Don't break off. Don't do anything. Keep it over there. But if you have a calcium score above 0, it's a sign that your body is making plaque. It's in the plaque progression cycle. And soft plaque, which is the intermediate part of plaque formation is the most dangerous type of plaque. That soft plaque is more easy to lodge off, cause a blood clot, cause a stroke, cause a heart attack. So we can reverse soft plaque, which is the most dangerous, through intensified dietary modification. So when we look at the research, what that really looks like is having a nutrient adequate diet that really focuses and targets all cardiometabolic risk factors and really helps to help with that regression. There's actually a really amazing study that looked at individuals who were counseled by a registered dietitian who had soft plaque. And what they did was, with the dietitian, they put them on an intensified DASH style diet with weekly outlooks and implementation to help with cultural differences, help with making sure that they understand how to even implement all of these various strategies within the DASH diet to regress plaque and improve all cardiometabolic metrics. So we can regress it. But that's soft plaque. We cannot reverse hardened plaque. Once you have that hardened plaque, we want to stabilize that, prevent the progression of more plaque as well.
Okay, so how do they measure soft plaque? Soft plaque, is that a calcium number?
So the calcium score is looking at your hardened plaque. When you do a CCTA, we're able to look at soft and hard.
Okay, got it. Okay, all right. So there are markers for that we can look at. Let's talk let's get into diet. Where are you at? Where are you at on diet? And, fundamentally, I mean, to me, it really is. I mean, you are what you eat. And there's so many diets out there. Some people are like, oh, it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle, whatever. At the end of the day, let me share me personally. I have tried so many different things. I've done every form of intermittent fasting. I've done the Mediterranean diet. I've done the South Beach diet. I've gone no carbs. I've gone minimal carbs. I've gone like, more fat, more protein, all that. I will tell you, for me personally, when I minimize my carbs, and I know you're going to tell us about complex carbs versus simple carbs and all that. But I don't know, for some reason, when I'm protein heavy, like 80% of my meals are protein, 20% are maybe beans or some form of, carbohydrate, I just feel better and I feel lighter. And that's when I've lost weight. Like I'm at my weight that I want to be now. And I find that when I am like leaning protein, I can maintain it versus any other thing. But you tell us what you think.
So I think it's important that we look at this from a science perspective of what I call nutrient adequate. I have clients who come to me who are vegan and who've been vegan their entire life, and they're like, I want to be a vegan. I'm like, that's fine, but I need to make sure you're nutrient adequate. So that's going to require me to provide you with some supplements, because you can't get all of these foods, these nutrients, through a vegan diet only. I have people who come to me who've done carnivore before, and I've had people who, eat meat and who don't. It's all over the spectrum. I'm not here to say you have to follow a vegan diet. I'm not here to say you have to follow this is what I say. My point being is you need to be nutrient adequate. So if you're only having protein, but you're constipated and your labs are all over the roof, to say it bluntly, if your labs are not within normal parameters, it's likely that there's something off in your diet. That, if I were to say the blunt truth, that's it, right? I think there's a lot of people, like the carnivore people, are like, oh, ApoB and LDL, none of it matters. I can do what I want because I'm lean and I'm fit and look at my muscles. Well, there was a study that actually showed individuals who were lean, athletic, no blood sugar, no blood pressure, no issues whatsoever. The only thing that was a problem was their LDL and ApoB were high. They had the fastest plaque progression we've ever seen in any study in just 1 year.
Okay. That's
Right.
very okay. And they looked good. Like it was like the athlete, Joe Rogan's a huge carnivore and he talks all about, eating elk and basically pretty much just eating meat. But I hear you. And honestly, I think it's good for me and everybody else to hear what you just said. And when I looked over your website and looked over your stuff, I'll tell you the thing that really spoke to me was, man, you really do key on nutrients and, being satiated with your food and things like that. So I think that's incredibly important. But all right, I appreciate you saying that. What was I going to ask you on? Okay, so it's not like you advocate for vegan, plant-based, carnivore, this, that, or anything along specifically, right?
I mean, so we have to look at the whole picture of things. To not have any plants in your diet is not science based.
Right.
We need to have some plants in your diet because honestly, you can't get folate and enough potassium and enough magnesium and enough actually butyrate, which helps with your gut microbiome without plant based foods. So we need to make sure that we are including them. I'd rather not give anyone a single supplement. I really believe in the power of food and eating foods in the whole food matrix to make that happen. But I think what a lot of people look at is, well, my goal is to lose weight. So I need to go into a caloric deficit. If I just eat protein, I'm satiated. I don't eat as much. So that's the diet that works for me. But on what expense of what else? What's your blood looking like? What's your blood pressure looking like? What is your stool looking like? What is your gut microbiome looking like? We need to advocate for an approach that takes into account nutrient adequacy, but still helps with your weight goal, right? And your muscle building goal and your brain health goal and your kidney goal and your liver goal. They're all connected. We shouldn't be looking at these things in silos. They all happen together. If an actual heart healthy diet will lower your LDL and ApoB, will also lower your blood sugar and your triglycerides and your blood pressure. All of them should be in optimal range. So I think a lot of the noise out there is really like, this doesn't matter, only this matters. And I hate to break it to anyone, but they all freaking matter. And we need to stop trying to say only one thing matters because it's a sign. If these things come back in your blood, it means it's not in the cell where it belongs. It's in excess. And that could damage your blood vessels. And we want to protect.
All right, that's great perspective. Well, what is ApoB? That's another one that I don't think many people even have heard before.
So LDL that's atherogenic has an ApoB, a protein attachment to it that signals the body to make plaque. So the higher the ApoB, and the targets are based on your relative risk, the higher the risk of atherosclerosis and that plaque progression too. So in the general population, that's less than 90 milligrams per deciliter. And someone who's had a cardiovascular event, that should be less than 70 milligrams per deciliter.
Okay. And what you might have said this earlier, is that not something that gets, measured regularly as part of the standard lipid panel? Because honestly, I've taken my parents to so many doctors, and my dad had heart-related issues, and so we went through the gamut with stuff. I don't think anyone's ever talked ApoB in a cardiology setting. And gosh, we went to the Cleveland Clinic, we went to UCLA, we went to UC Irvine, some of the best heart hospitals in the world to get him looked at. And yeah, I don't think anybody's ever even talked that.
So a lot of it is from a preventative standpoint. So if someone has established cardiovascular disease, it's typically looked at just by LDL alone. When we're talking about more prevention and more of that outlook, there are a subgroup of people who can have normal LDL levels, but they have very high ApoB levels. It's what we call discordance between LDL and ApoB. And so this is just one more level of a preventative approach. And you have to understand an important fact. When I got my RD exam, when I became an RD, I got my license, all of that, I was a general dietitian. I went through my own cardiology training, so to speak. And so I specialize in cardiovascular disease. In my practice, I only see individuals with cardiovascular risk factors or if they've had cardiovascular disease. And so this is my specialty. Many primary care doctors, maybe many cardiologists are not looking at lipidology from an aspect of preventive atherosclerosis like I am. So a lot of them are like, I don't even know what to do with this if it's high. So they don't test it. In order for you to truly reduce your risk of heart disease, you have to be your own advocate and you have to know what to ask for. You have to know what to say. You have to know how to read your numbers or be with someone who can educate you on that, because I explain the why with everything. I'm not going to tell you, hey, you need to add plants because I said so. I'm going to tell you exactly why certain ones do certain things in your body. And so I think it's important that you understand the why, because then you're your own advocate. You get to that doctor's office and you own the conversation. So white coat syndrome doesn't happen because you're not waiting for the doctor to tell you. You're saying, hey, I saw this. Hey, I want to make sure I have a strong family history. I need to check this. And a lot of doctors, if they don't know what it is, they'll be like, I don't know what to do with it. If it's high, I can't check it. And a lot of my clients will go and say, I'm working with a preventative cardiology dietitian. She's asking me for these. And they're like, okay, if she's going to handle them, I'll order them for you. And you know what's really funny when that happens? Most of the time when that's being said, my clients will come back and say, my insurance accepted all of them. I didn't pay a penny out of pocket.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Okay.
Have to advocate and you have to say, why are you doing this? And what are you going to do with that information? Because
Yeah.
a lot of them don't require a medicine. They require a dietary change. And so
Yes.
that's why the doctor is not proficient in nutrition. I've done so much schooling, experience, and education to know the biological pathways, nutrition, and how labs get interacted with it. But doctors are really good at medical management of disease. That doesn't, so they might not be testing preventative lab values because it's still a prevention focus. And they are still in the treatment focus because that's how our medicine has developed in the US.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Okay, let's talk about blood pressure because that was something you brought up in our call that honestly, I was like, I mean, man, I track everything and I measure so many things. I do measure my blood pressure maybe once every couple months, but I need to do that more. Like, maybe that needs, yeah, is that a daily thing you do?
Yes. So I highly recommend everybody getting a blood pressure cuff and testing blood pressure every single day. I will tell you, when I do my thorough intake, I will ask every single one of my patients if they've checked their blood pressure. And the people who've said, oh yeah, in the last 3 years, my blood pressure went up. And then they had a cardiovascular event. They were signs. People are always shocked when they have a heart attack and when they have a stroke. They always think it's not going to be me. It's always sometimes they're like, I'm the fittest of my friends. I am, I'm an athlete, or, I eat healthy, I eat clean. How could this happen to me? And then when you look at their medical record, there were signs for a full decade that things were brewing in their arteries and nobody said a thing. And so I highly recommend that blood pressure be taken because if you notice that yours is trending above your baseline, that's a sign that something is brewing in your arteries and you need to take action as soon as possible. And so for me, ideally, we're looking at 110/70. That's the
Wow.
ideal blood pressure measurement.
Okay, okay. That's even lower than I thought because I thought 120/80 has been the generally recognized quote unquote textbook, kind of like the 200 cholesterol number. You're saying 110/70.
Yep. So 120/80 has kind of been a general guideline, but we've seen actually that when we bring it to 110/70, we reduce the risk of atherosclerosis, heart failure, and AFib tremendously. And I'll tell you why. We are people. You get stressed, I get stressed. Even if we meditate as much as we want to meditate and we go outside and connect with nature and everything like that, we're people. We're going to get stressed. It's just part of our nature. And if your baseline is 110/80, 120/80, what happens when you're stressed? You now brought it up to 150, 160 over whatever, 90, right? If your baseline is 110/70 and you're stressed and okay, you go up to 130 or 130/80 during that time and you bring it back down, the impact for that short period of time is not as hard. It's easier for your body to recover down. So your baseline should be at a lower amount when you are in a relaxed state so that we prepare for stressful events that are part of being a human.
Very, very good point.
That's a
Hey,
big part of it.
let me ask you this in terms of driving up blood pressure, the factors. Obviously, I think stress is huge. And, you mentioned white coat lab syndrome. That's definitely something my mom has. I mean, the second we step into, her primary care's doctor and they always take your blood pressure right away. That first reading is like off the charts with her. It's like 180, 110. And I'm like, Mom, calm down. Actually, this was funny. I literally left the room on accident the next time. And then I come back in and I'm like, what was it? And the lady's like, yeah, 110/70. I'm like, okay, gosh, I guess I'm a stress factor. but but what are some other outside of stress, what are other things that drive people's blood pressure up on a consistent basis?
So it could be a lot of things that people don't realize. I'll give you some that are a little bit unique, and then I'll also tell you some traditional factors. So one is insulin resistance. We
Okay.
actually have a feedback loop. So if someone has either a high salt diet, a high sugar diet, it actually can lead for the kidneys to retain sodium, which can increase your blood pressure. We also know gut issues can increase blood pressure because we need certain gut bacteria in our gut to then speak to our oral microbiome to make nitric oxide production. And if we don't have good bacteria in our gut, that conversion will not take place. It will lead to our arteries to be constricted versus vasodilated. I'm going to drive my message home about nutrient adequacy. If you are deficient in potassium, magnesium, calcium, folate, you name it, a lot of nutrients, that can cause an increase in blood pressure because there's tension in your arteries and you don't have the proper nutrients to open them up to vasodilate them. A imbalance in sodium to potassium can cause high blood pressure. Obesity, abdominal weight can cause high blood pressure. Excess alcohol consumption. There's a lot of things. Just think about what high blood pressure really means. Your heart is working harder to pump blood throughout the body. So anytime that there is havoc in the bloodstream, anytime that there is more of a constricted state, it's going to increase your blood pressure, which is why it's so important for us to be measuring it. And it's no one talks about it, but it's one of the most important things you can be testing every single day. You don't feel it until maybe it's a hypertensive crisis. It can respond really well to nutrition. This is one of the easiest medications to come off of is blood pressure medication, but you do it smartly. You take your blood pressure if it's high, or if it's normal with blood pressure medication, you then work on those aspects. We assess what's causing the high blood pressure, we address it. Your blood pressure comes down. We don't want low blood pressure. If it becomes 90/60, or you're symptomatic, you're lightheaded, you're dizzy, you tell your doctor. They usually take you off the medication because we don't want low blood pressure. So it
Right.
works really nice, but we have to be monitoring this every single day at home, whether you're on blood pressure medications or you're not. It's so, so, so important.
Okay, got it. Let's talk about salt and sugar. I mean, I think those two are two of the biggest silent killers. But how do you, I guess, tell your patients to maybe look for salt and sugar? Assuming I think you probably think they're pretty bad too, right?
Yeah. So I always like to say in excess, right? Because I find a lot of people, if they're like, okay, I got to get rid of all of my sugar, they then crave it and then they binge, which is the worst thing that they can do, right? So we need to also know it's not a no salt diet. It's just not a high salt diet. And you have to understand that the importance of that. I think a lot of people think salt just from a blood pressure standpoint, but there's actually a lot of studies that a high salt diet messes up your gut microbiome. It
Hmm.
actually decreases some of the good bacteria in your gut. High salt diet can actually also contribute to insulin resistance. We see its role in so many things, no matter what type of salt you use. I think a lot of times, oh, well, I use Himalayan salt, so I'm fine. No,
Yeah.
salt is
Yeah.
salt. Let's be real about that.
Himalayan salt is sassy or snazzy entrepreneurship at its finest. It's like, oh, Himalayan salt. Oh, that must be even good for me. Let me add actually, yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. Salt also, I'm assuming when you have an excess, that also causes retention of water that can lead to inflammation and that could lead to, acidic environments inside your body that I love your term havoc in the blood. I think that's so good. And I think that happens quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely. And then, so it's not a no salt diet, right? So if you have high blood pressure, 1500 milligrams is kind of where we want you to be. If you don't, in the general population, 2300 milligrams is fine. If you sweat a lot and you are perspiring or you're in a sauna a lot, yeah, you need a little bit more. We can adjust that.
Okay, got it, got it, got it. Okay, that's good. That's good to know because I do hit the dry sauna as part of my lifestyle ritual. And actually, let's talk about. Okay, let's finish on salt. Anything else on salt
So
and sugar?
Salt does not work in tandem by itself. Sodium and potassium work together. So we
Okay.
need to understand that. Like if you go to a restaurant, you can't control the salt in your food. And let me tell you, it adds up quickly. 1 teaspoon of salt has 2,300 milligrams of sodium, right? So imagine a big pinch here, you're done. But potassium will offset the sodium. So we have to be looking at pairings of food, which I talk about a lot because our bodies need certain nutrients together to absorb it in our gut. And the same thing goes with sodium. So we don't retain that fluid as well. We need that potassium next to it. Yeah.
Okay. Do you weigh yourself every day?
I don't weigh myself every day. I don't, that's not a measure I'm really working on. I'm kind of more of like how I feel, my strength and all of that. But I do take my blood pressure every day and I have a chronically low blood pressure. My blood pressure is 90/60
Wow.
routinely. And so when I go to the doctor, sometimes it's like 85/50. They're like, "Are you alive?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm fine." But I know if my blood pressure went to 110/70, something's wrong because my baseline is 90/60.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pressure for me is huge. I don't go on the scale every day. I used to. I'll be totally honest with you. My battery in my scale, I had one of the like one of those fancier scales
Yeah.
for things. It died, and I'm like, I didn't like buy one, so I haven't gone in a while. But I go when I go to my doctor's office, and like it's very consistent. So I'm happy there.
Okay. All right. That's totally fair. I do it every day. It's kind of part of my, again, life ritual. I just find it keeps me honest. It just keeps me honest. And it also like helps me understand, I know a lot of that is water weight as well. And I'll give you a perfect example. I mean, had dinner at a restaurant the other day. I felt like I overindulged a little bit. Had a couple drinks. And like again, I woke up the next day and that scale was accurate. I mean, for me, it's sometimes crazy. It's like I'll wake up that next day and I'm like 3 or 4 pounds heavier than the previous day. Now I know that number probably is dramatically, if not all, water weight, but it also helps me understand, the quality of the food at that restaurant, maybe the additions of salt and things like that. And then when I go through my workout ritual, my running, my sweating and all that, it's like the next day it's right back down. And I'm like, that's insane. You had a 8 pound swing in weight over 2 days, according to the scale, which again, obviously I know that's not like fat or things like that. Okay.
Before you say anything, I want you to add in the blood pressure because I'm curious to know if you're salt sensitive. So if
Okay.
you gain 3 to 4 pounds after a restaurant meal and your blood pressure went up by 10, 20 points,
Okay.
you know your body is more salt sensitive than someone who doesn't have that same effect.
Okay, that's a great addition. I will do that. And by the way, when you say the cuff, do you like the cuffs that go like around the bicep? Or I know they also make them that almost looks like a big watch that goes around the wrist. What do you think?
This is inaccurate. This
Okay.
is accurate. This
Okay.
is not the right height for your body for it to actually be accurate. It has to be at the height of your heart in order to really know your blood pressure.
Okay, great tip. All right, guys. So listen, if you want to take your health to the next level, the one thing maybe to go out and buy is I think they're like 30, $40. It's a cuff, goes around your basically bicep. And then there's a million videos online of how to properly take your blood pressure. All right, I'm going to add that to the mix. I am going to add that to the mix. I really am. Let's talk about water and sleep. I'd love to get your thoughts on water intake and then where sleep fits into all this.
Yeah, so water is huge. And a lot of people think that, oh, I only drink when I'm thirsty. Well, let me tell you, your body's terrible at telling you you're dehydrated. And I can't help it, but I'm going to bring it back to the heart because that's what I do.
Yeah.
Imagine if you're dehydrated. What happens to the blood? The blood becomes thicker, it becomes stickier, it becomes more acidic. That is an environment where plaque is easy to make. Right? Your LDL is more sticky. It's going to cause more potential, it's going to cause more of your heart to have to work harder to pump blood throughout your body. We need to make sure you're adequately hydrated as part of a heart healthy regimen. But take it slow, right? If you're someone who only drinks a cup of water a day, well, don't go to 8, 9, 10 cups of water tomorrow. You'll complain to me you're in the bathroom all day. I want to make sure that you are letting your body utilize it appropriately. So go slow and steady. quantity. From 1 cup, go to 2 cups. Do it for a couple days, add another cup. So your body is like, oh, I'm getting hydrated. You will feel better, but you'll also help your body with actually digesting food better and helping with your blood viscosity too, and which is so important for your overall heart health. So water is so important and not really talked about as enough as it should be.
Okay, okay. Do you consider tea water?
Yeah, up to a liter of tea can count towards your.
Okay, all right, all right. Let's talk about sleep. Is that something that you like to really talk about with your patients and measure and all that?
Yeah, so sleep is huge. A lot of people can have, for instance, sleep apnea and never get diagnosed, and that can increase your blood pressure. That can cause inflammation and oxidative stress. So we need to be making sure your quality of sleep is optimal, and so is your quantity. And I think a lot of it also has to do with this crazy world right now. People are always on their phone. They're really stressed with the news of the world. And so you being stressed before bed, what does it do? It blocks melatonin production. You're not going to have a good sleep. You're going to have trouble going to bed. And then a lot of people will say, oh, I'll just pop melatonin. You want your body to be making melatonin. Your sleep is your natural antioxidant defense system. It is vital to your heart health. It is vital for everything. When you're awake, you have a lot of brain activity. When you're sleeping, you're restoring that. And so we have to make sure we're not shortening sleep and we're getting in that 7 to 8 hours every single night with good quality. It protects the heart and it also just helps protects all organs of our body. A lot of people will come to me when they're trying to retire and they'll say, yeah, I worked so hard. I slept 3 4 hours because I had to get to my deadlines. And, I now realize how that affected me, but I don't realize till much later. And it's important that, in order for you to be more efficient at work, more efficient just in general, you need to prioritize sleep. You can't catch up for it later in life. You have to make sure at this current moment you are looking at what can you do to make it better, to make your sleep environment better, to get good restorative sleep for your overall health.
Okay, fantastic. Let's talk about, are there any foods that you love? Like, what do you eat breakfast, lunch, dinner? I mean, obviously, you don't have to give us everything, but like, are there things that are really a staple and a part of your, let's say, diet or lifestyle 7 days a week that you eat that people could, maybe start eating?
Yeah, so like I said before, it's really about getting that robust amount of nutrients. And so I always make sure that I have a good amount of protein at every one of my meals. And it's usually a combination of plant based protein alongside animal based protein that's very lean. So Greek yogurt, your omega 3 rich fish, sardines, salmon, your beans, lentils, legumes, all of that super important to incorporate. Especially, I do resistance training and I'm very active. And so I need to make sure I'm fueling my body. And that's going to give me that satiety, but it's also going to help me with my muscle building goals that I'm also working on as well. So protein's always there. And it usually I like to change things up. I don't usually eat the same thing every day, but protein's always there. My fiber is always there, whether it's coming from my berries, my greens, my Brussels sprouts, my broccoli, like making sure I have a wide variety of vegetables that I enjoy, that I tolerate well, that gives me a variety of different nutrients from lycopene to anthocyanins. I want to get a good rounded approach. And then including healthy fats and including beans, whole grains, legumes. They feel good in my body. They react well in my GI tract. And so I incorporate them. But some people don't tolerate them well. And if that is the case, I like to stress for you, well, what are you eating to help get those nutrients from foods you do enjoy and you do like? I think a lot of times when we box ourselves into, oh, I have to eat like her, it's not doable. It's important that we're taking into account cultural preferences and making sure that it is something that works with you and your family, but also that tastes good. Because from a I know we say the lifestyle versus a diet is such a cliche way of looking at it, but if you really want to eradicate heart disease and live a long, healthy life in your hundreds, you need to be making this into a long-term plan. You don't want to be yo-yo dieting, going on this crash diet and that crash diet. You want to make sure you're eating in a way that supports all of your cardiometabolic lab values, optimizes them, and keeps them in optimal range for the rest of your life to really prevent heart attacks long term. And so, really making sure that this is something sustainable. I mean, I used to work before COVID, I had my office in Manhattan, and every one of my clients would put their shoes in their oven. They would eat at restaurants every single day, every single meal in their kitchen. And so I had to adapt to that. We had to make it work because that was their lifestyle. I have a lot of clients who travel all the time. And if you're just going to wait to fix your lifestyle when things slow down, let me be blunt and honest with you. Life doesn't slow down. It always gets busier and busier. And you
Yeah.
got to prioritize your health in order for you to really live a long, healthy life. You can't wait until you're retired to then start looking at this. You got to start early, and you have to be honest with yourself. I always tell my clients, if I tell you to eat something and you hate it, tell me. I want to work that challenge through with you. Some people tell me I'm a picky eater, and they are really picky eaters, but
Yeah.
I dive deeper. What is it? Is it the texture? Is it the taste? Is it the combination? What are we trying? We need to get these probiotics in. Like, just giving you an example, one of my clients hates yogurt. She says it's too tart. It doesn't taste good. It's gross. And I go, okay, well, what is it? The tartness. Okay, we can change that up. What are we adding to it? Okay, how does it feel in your body? Oh, actually made me go to the bathroom better. Oh, you're getting yourself some probiotics. So we need to walk through those challenges to really understand what can we improve? Because what you're probably not eating is what we need to look into a little bit more. What are the nutrients found in those foods? How can we get them in through foods you do like? And if we can't, then maybe we supplement. But food first. It's the most.
I love that. I love that. I love that you're food first. I think that's absolutely the way you should be. And ironically, I own a supplement company, but I think that people should absolutely try to get everything they can from their food and use supplements exactly as they're intended and exactly as the meaning of the word supplement. It's not replacement, it's supplement. But part of that's the American culture. It's always looking for the quick fix. And the other thing is portion control. I will say for me, I know if I can have portion control, I can open myself up to eating so many more and different things that might satisfy me as long as I can do it in the small amounts. But that's difficult. And that kind of goes back to the American culture as well. And then the one thing you said, which is so interesting to me, and it's been always been so interesting, and that's about people in Manhattan, let's say pre-COVID. I mean, people eat out at restaurants so much, but every time I go to Manhattan, I don't really see fat people. I don't really see people overweight. So then I'm like, okay, it must be all the walking. Everybody seems to walk everywhere. Is it that or what is it? Because you really don't see that many fat people in Manhattan.
Well, first off, not everyone's walking the streets that are in their offices and sitting behind desks. I mean, I work with individuals who literally are sitting at their desk for 8 to 10 hours plus a day in their office. They're ordering food to get into their office. So you're not really seeing them out and about. They're taking a cab from their office to their home. They're not moving. So there are some outliers in that. But I also want to say, you can be fit and still have heart disease. I see so many
Okay, good
athletes
point.
in my practice, and they're like, but I'm fit. I'm like, but your arteries can still get clogged because of what you're actually putting inside and how you're addressing oxidative stress and how you're addressing the nutrition and physical activity parameter. And that's the thing, right? We're always looking for one thing. If I ask people, how would you describe someone who has a heart attack? Most people will say an old bald guy that's overweight. And can I tell you that most of my clients who come to my office are fit. They're not eating processed foods. They're not eating junk food. They're not eating that. It's just that we aren't honing into the vascular space and looking at cardiometabolic health the way we need to. We need to be testing numbers, and we need to advocate for what they look like and what they mean so that we can help adjust them, because nutrition plays such a vital role here. And like you said, give me a pill, give me a supplement, give me this. We need to work on the diet. And I'm not saying that that's easy to do. It is a lot of hard work,
Right.
but you get more energy, you feel better, you can run with your grandkids, you can travel. The benefits come so abundantly from honing into your nutrition that like you have to look at it kind of from that, am I ready to take this next step? Yes, it's effort. Yes, it's work. Yes, maybe I won't eat my favorite cheeseburger every day, but it does give so much beautiful benefit. But we have to realize that we need to put some effort into it, like anything in life that's worth it, right?
Absolutely. 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 Do you track your steps on a daily basis? Is that part of your routine?
So I used to, and then I don't know, I think my skin's too sensitive, but those nickel things, I started getting rashes. So I'm like, screw this. So I start all of my days on my walking pad, checking emails, anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. Usually if I can spot in a little bit after my lunch, I'll go back on there. I go outside of my yard a lot. I run around with my kids, and then I always am either doing my tunnel and Peloton or I'm paddle boarding. Like I'm super active, and I know myself that if I'm sitting for too long, like more than 2.5 hours, like I'm start getting a little like not even antsy, like I need to get up. So I think I've almost like programmed that. I can't
Yeah.
sit too long anyway. So I'm standing a lot in my standing desk or I'm walking. And I find that, that and my weight's stable where I want it. I'm seeing gains in muscle mass. So for me, I'd rather check things that I can't necessarily feel or see, and that's really my blood pressure and my every 3 months I get blood work to make sure everything is where I want them to be.
Oh, wow. You get blood work every 3 months.
Yeah, so I have LP little a. So I have lipoprotein little a, which is a genetic risk factor for
Oh,
cardiovascular disease. So I like to keep my LDL and my ApoB at a really optimal range. And so I check it. I'm not on any supplements. I'm not on any drugs. It's just my diet. And it's really consistent every 3 months. And so that gives me a peace of mind because there's so much noise out there. How this is like the triple threat with heart disease. And I've done all the scans. My arteries are clean. Everything's clean. My blood pressure is great. But for me, I want to be proactive. And I tell my clients every 3 to 6 months, if these are think targets, like we should be testing them. Let's not play around. Let's make sure you feel good and confident about it too.
no, I love it. I love it. Okay. All right. Any takeaways or any final parting thoughts before I have you tell everybody how they can find you and all that? I'll tell you what I've learned from this, which is awesome. One is I'm absolutely going to start measuring my blood pressure on a daily basis. I have a cuff, so I'm going to start using it, especially after those, you know what? Especially after those days where I see a number on the scale that I don't like, I'm going to make sure I measure it that day to see how that corresponds with how my blood pressure is that day. Secondly, I love the tip about measuring from your belly button around your waist. And I'll try to provide some more clarity around that for people. I think that's great. But any other sort of hacks, fitness, diet, not diet, I don't even know what to call it, but any other Michelle hacks that people can take away from this initial episode? Because I'm going to ask them back.
So, what I would say is, I want to make sure that you're an advocate for your own health. How many times do you get blood work and you wait for the doctor to call you, say, it looks fine? Can I tell you what that means? That means it looks fine where I don't need to give you a medication. That's what it means, which means there's a gap of, ooh, things are brewing and I could actually reduce this with my diet. Most times doctors won't call you and say, oh, we need to go on a statin until it's, ooh, really high for their standards. So ask for your blood work, get your blood work and look at your trends. If you're noticing, oh, wow, my triglycerides went up 70 points the last time, it's still normal, but it's like not normal. What are we doing different? Let's be a proactive component to your care. So take out your blood work, see if you can look at 3 trends. I always look at, okay, the last 3 years, where did it go? Or the last 3 times you got blood tests, what are those values? Okay, and trend them. If they went in the wrong direction, what are you doing to change them? If something was high, let's say you went to the doctor and, oh, wow, this was flagged as high, don't wait a whole year until you recheck it. Get it done 3 months later, get it done 6 months later at most. Because if you just wait and monitor it like you may with blood pressure, things are brewing. We don't like things brewing. Let's be proactive. By being proactive, you have to know your numbers, know your targets, and achieve them within a small window of time, or at least see the trend in the right direction. Because heart disease doesn't happen from one elevation of LDL, ApoB, cholesterol, inflammation. It happens from multiple years. And if you have a strong family history, the year span is smaller. If you have no family history, maybe you have a 10-year window of time. But many times people don't go to the doctor until they feel bad. They don't test their blood work. They have no idea what the blood work means.
Right.
So they're kind of clueless. Be a proactive participant in your care. Get that blood work, see what's going on, and make sure that you are asking questions. And if you need extra support on getting these optimized, seek that. I think a lot of times we feel like, oh, we have to do this all alone. You really don't.
Right.
Seek that appropriate component to help you so that this can be a lifelong plan. Because once you understand how to improve them and then you improve them and you go, wow, I did that, you'll continue to do that lifestyle forever because you know it works in your body.
Absolutely. Okay, fantastic. Okay, tell us where we can find you so I can put all this in the show notes and hopefully you'll get some clients out of this.
Yeah, happy to. So feel free to follow me. Check out my website. That's where my hub of information is. So entirelynourished.com. I have an email list that I send out tips every Tuesday into your inbox so you can join there. I'm active on different social channels. So on entirelynourished.com, you can check out my LinkedIn. You can check out my Instagram. Those are where I'm most active on a regular basis. You can binge a lot of my content there. I have a lot of free educational content I put out on my website too. So that's the best place to reach me. If you want to contact me, you can contact me through my website or even you can message me directly at michelle@entirelynourished.com.
All right, that's awesome. I'll put all that in the show notes. All right, listen, I really appreciate it. I really learned a lot. I did. And, I kind of think of myself as ahead of the curve on the health and fitness and wellness stuff, but you know what? You can always get better, and I got better after listening to this. I'm going to measure my blood pressure every day.
You have to tell me how it goes.
I love that. I love that. I think it's really good. And maybe what we'll do is, if I get a bunch of questions from people and all that, I'd love to maybe do a part 2 of this where we really dive in, topic by topic and really add some meat or some protein to the bones of what we created today.
I love that. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
All right. Thanks, Michelle. All right, everybody. All right. Seriously, let's take our health seriously. Also, I love Michelle's additional feedback of maybe getting your blood tested more than once a year. I've talked to everybody about starting off the year, going to your doctor and getting blood tests. But you know what? I think you're absolutely right. We should add a 6-month check there. And then who knows, depending on what insurance covers and what things can happen, maybe every 3 months is good, because knowing the data and knowing your markers and looking for trends, it's absolutely vital. And, gosh, somebody said something. They're like, when you're healthy, I love this actually, and we'll end on this. He said, when you're healthy, you've got a million problems. But when you're not healthy, you have one problem, and that's your health. And I really do love that, because without good health, nothing else really matters. So, all right, everybody, call a spade a spade. Michelle, hang on the line, and we will talk to you guys soon.
This episode was brought to you by Zippix nicotine toothpicks. Zip more, smoke less. Totally satisfying, discreet, and delicious. Zippix nicotine-infused toothpicks are available in 6 great flavors, each containing at least 2 milligrams of nicotine to curb those cravings. Zippix is FDA registered and proudly made in the USA. Use discount code DSD for 10% off your order at zippixtoothpicks.com. Zip more, smoke less, save 10%.